Okay, I'm going to speak a bit about a subject in this video that in this country, and it has to be said in a lot of Western countries, is always quite controversial. But it's something I've never really touched on much before, and I do think it's topical. Um, that is about immigration, migration. Um, there's been a report tonight on the BBC that net migration has increased in the year up to September 2013. It was 212,000 in that year. To put things in context, that's roughly the population of Aberdeen. So, like, if you imagine a sort of medium-sized town city in the UK, that's the sort of statistic we're looking at, and it's a lot higher than government targets of 100,000 a year. Angela Merkel's been in Britain today, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and I believe this issue was discussed. She agrees with Cameron in some areas. I think it's always going to be a controversial issue in an island nation like Britain, and that is an important factor. At the moment, Britain has a population, I should say the United Kingdom has a population of 64 million. That's a pretty big population when you consider we're a relatively small country in terms of area. We are currently the 22nd most populous country in the world, but in terms of size we rank about 79th. Okay, that means that the proportion of population in this country is definitely overpopulated in terms of density per square mile. And as hard as it might be to believe, we are actually more densely populated than China. Now, I've heard Chinese people say, oh, you've no idea how big a population China is. Well, that's true, China is the world's biggest population, but in recent years, partly thanks to the one-child policy, it has stabilised. In fact, it will get slightly less in coming years. Also, China is a huge country, it's a huge area, and it's not evenly distributed. You have provinces like Sichuan, Shandong, Guangdong, which are very heavily populated. Then places like Xinjiang, Heilongjiang, which are very sparsely populated. So it's true China has a huge population, but in terms of proportionality, Britain is actually more heavily populated, more densely populated. That's just to put things in context. We are actually one of the most densely populated countries in the world. I believe we're in the top 25. So this is a serious issue, because in the future our population is not going down. The growth rate in overall population isn't as fast growing as, for example, some African countries. Nevertheless, it is growing. It's currently 64 million. In 20-30 years it's going to be well over 70 million, so it is growing. And there are going to be issues about how people are distributed and just how many migrants this country can take. Now, there's a few angles I want to take with this. First of all, my own stance on immigration. Broadly speaking, I am not hostile to it. Broadly speaking. However, I regard myself as somewhat in the middle with this, because at the same time, I don't want to see a situation where there's an open door policy, anyone could come in, and there's very little controls. Now, Labour has accused the government of being in shambles over this. Labour wasn't much better, frankly, when they were in power. I think there needs to be some more drastic steps to control immigration. One of the biggest problems with this is that if you talk about the issue of immigration in Britain, you're automatically branded a right-winger or even a racist. And the political left, political liberals, definitely have a habit of silencing anyone that brings up the subject and branding you as a nasty, small-minded little Englander, etc. I believe this country is part of the international community. We should be open from the point of view of being an open market. Having said that, it is entirely legitimate that any sovereign nation takes some control of its borders. And at the moment, when you have a situation that there's a surplus of 112,000 people over the target, clearly that's a problem. And another factor about immigration, by the way, in terms of asylum seekers, I'm very sympathetic to that. I've argued that we should take a moral role in giving refuge to people fleeing war and persecution. I do believe we have a moral part to play in that. However, most migrants are not here for humanitarian reasons. They're economic migrants, and that's a different thing. At the moment there's an influx of Romanians and Bulgarians. Now from their perspective they accuse Britain of taking a racist attitude towards us, but there is definitely more migration in Britain than there is in Romania or Bulgaria. So I think that's a bit of a... I think it's wrong for the leadership of Romania and Bulgaria to lecture Britain on not raising questions about this, because the questions are entirely legitimate. Now, most of the people who come here are hard-working, they do contribute to society, and that's always a sensitive issue. But there is legitimate concerns over people getting privileges that some British people would not get in terms of housing benefit and so on. And this is not right-wing scaremongering. You know, you can find this on government statistics on the BBC. It's not just from the right-wing gutter press, which I hate, by the way. But the political left has to wake up and realise this isn't just tabloid scaremongering. There are some serious issues here. You know, I believe that diversity does make a nation strong. So that's why I'm not against immigration per se. And I do believe it can be advantageous to our economy. Especially, and I think, for example, in education, I do believe we have world-class universities, and the government has put off international students from coming here from, for example, Commonwealth countries. We're making it too difficult for students to apply to come to the UK. That's an issue. But there's other issues like integration, for example. I strongly believe that one of the conditions for being a migrant to this country should be, you know, it's all very well saying that you have a job and you contribute to society and so on, but I believe there needs to be one more factor in that. There needs to be a strong liking for this country. It seems to be something that's left off this whole debate. And I do question people who come to this country just for economic reasons and they have no strong feelings about the UK and then they go back, regardless of where they're from. I think that's wrong. I think if you want to live in the UK, you have to love the UK. And by the way, if anyone says this is a hypocritical position to take because there's plenty of Britons that do whinging, frankly I wish they would leave. I strongly believe that if you live in a country, then it's fine to complain about problems. That's legitimate in any democracy. But if all you do is complain, then you're contributing nothing to society. That applies to people who come here, and it applies to British people who are already here. Fine, you can find things to not like, but at least don't be so negative all the time. At least find some things that you do like. And I do feel quite frustrated when I see people come from other parts of the world and they don't integrate. Now this for me is an important issue because it's in everyone's interest. And again, it's the sort of word whereby the far left or neoliberals would say you're a racist if you dare talk about it. It's not racism to raise legitimate issues like this. You know, the saying, when in Rome do as the Romans do, is very apt. When I went to China, I made an attempt to speak Chinese. I tried to endorse local culture. I certainly didn't force my culture on anyone. Now what I find is a lot of people who come to the UK isolate themselves and they build up their own communities with their own culture, and they don't open that, or they don't open themselves to endorsing British culture. This is a very, very legitimate concern. And I do believe it's important that if people want to live in this country, they make reasonable attempts to integrate. Now of course it's not fair to expect people to do all the work themselves. It is hard when you're in another country, and that's why I say to my fellow Britons that we should try and make people feel welcome. Because imagine if you're in their shoes and you're in another country, you would want to feel welcome. So it's responsibility on both sides. From my point of view, I always try to make foreign visitors feel welcome. But by the same token, I also get quite frustrated. And I have to say, sometimes I see this within the Chinese community. It's one of the communities that is not very good at integrating. You know, you see Chinatowns everywhere. And don't get me wrong, I love Chinatowns. But too often, Chinese people that come to the UK don't make reasonable attempts to integrate here. And I do think it's a problem. Partly it's because there's so many Chinese students, for example, that it's very easy for them to just stay with other Chinese students. And it's understandable to an extent. But I don't think it's open-minded. And I think when opportunities do come, if you are Chinese, I'm not saying this to offend you, I'm saying that this will help your experience in the UK. Now, there is racism in this country, unfortunately, but at the same time, the issues about immigration are very legitimate questions. I will always condemn vicious racism, always, okay? And no one who comes to this country deserves to be a victim of a racist attack. No one should be made to feel lonely or scared or receive hostile treatment. At the same time, though, people who come to this country do have some responsibility. And like I say, I'm not going to generalise, many people do assume that responsibility. And I'm not just talking about work. I believe it's more than work, because someone can work hard but not necessarily integrate. Integration to me is a key issue. And with integration, I'm not just talking about speaking English. I'm talking about such issues as trying to endorse British culture, i.e. not always being wrapped up in your own culture and demanding respect for your own culture. There's far too much political correctness on this issue, and the political left and liberals have a habit of accusing you of being a member of the BNP. Okay, I have contempt for the BNP. I'm not a member of the BNP, and it pisses me off when the left does that anyone who wants to raise these issues is silenced. You'll probably see in this video I'm sending out quite mixed messages, but that's because I'm genuinely somewhere in the middle on the immigration issue. I do believe that a diverse society can help a country, but at the same time, I think it is reasonable to ask people to make reasonable attempts to integrate. So someone comes to this country and their mindset is, oh, I'm just going to endorse my own culture, but I'm not going to be open-minded about other cultures. That, in my opinion, is a bad attitude, and they don't deserve to be here, quite frankly. Because if we, here in Britain, it's sort of a paradox, because we had the world's largest empire. Everyone knows how Britain went over the world. We forced British culture on other countries. We were massively influential in the creation of the modern world. So it is hypocritical for Brits to complain about people coming in here, because we went out there. That's an important issue, and that's why I would say to people who say, oh, we should have no immigration, look at our history. This is a little bit of, I guess you could call it karma. So, what I'm trying to get at in this video is, broadly speaking, I'm pro-immigration. And by the way, that thing about Chinese people, I didn't mean that to sound like I was focusing on the Chinese. It's just something I have observed. And Chinese friends themselves have told me they do find it hard to integrate, but I've told them do try to take opportunities when they come. And to be fair, maybe I worded that slightly badly, because I didn't mean to imply that all Chinese people don't integrate. There are many that do. Okay, so I apologise if I worded that badly. I know certainly many of my Chinese friends do try to be open-minded. They do take an interest in British culture, but some don't, and it is a bad mentality to have, in my opinion. What's the point of going to the other side of the world if you're just going to be focused on your own culture? To me, that's just closed-minded. Britain has always been an open country. We're an island nation, and that's not going to change. But I do think it is reasonable to raise issues about immigration and how, and I know there's this claim, a lot of people from countries like Romania and Bulgaria turn around and say, oh, look at the lazy Britons claiming welfare, etc. They do no work. I can understand some of the arguments with that, but the point is, this is a small island, we have a very large population, and it isn't just about contributing to the country through work. A lot of people can work hard. It's not about that only. It's also about actually making efforts to integrate. And like I say, it's not fair to put all the weight on their shoulders. It's not fair to expect people to integrate if they don't get the opportunities to do that. But what I would say to anyone watching this video who is from another country, I want you to have a good experience in the UK. I don't want you to feel lonely or unwelcome or scared. But I do think that you have a responsibility to try and take opportunities when they come. Britain has a long track record of tolerance, and when you compare Britain's attitude to immigration to a country like China, which sends North Korean refugees back, we are a lot better. But that doesn't mean there are not legitimate questions to be raised.